Hey movers, shakers, and the stuck but curious. I'm Freya Gordon, and this is Good Shift, the podcast that helps you figure out what's next in your career and make a move with confidence. On today's episode of Good Shift, we're diving in with someone who has built her entire career around purpose. As you'll quickly discover, Alexa is extremely creative, and she's made many thoughtful career pivots that have all come together to shape what she's built today. Alexa's journey has not been linear. At 16, she started by founding a non-profit art collective called Art Tribe that raised hundreds of thousands for the Spiral Foundation. She assembled a team of movers and shakers to support her, including Steven Spielberg's daughter. She spent almost a decade behind the lens as a professional photographer. She worked for her family's media company, and then she became one of the earliest hires at Olipop, where she helped turn a Better For You soda into a household name in the United States. And through all of that, Alexa has chosen to create and to build and to shift with impact in mind. Today, she's the founder of Social Bloome, a marketing agency helping mission-driven brands grow with authenticity and community at the centre. And while her path sounds seamless on paper, what we'll dig into today is the reality that every shift comes with barriers, doubts, and hard choices. And that's what this podcast is here to help you with. Understanding how real people do the work to move through those moments and to create something meaningful. In this conversation, she's going to take us through her inside story of navigating purpose-driven pivots, building community as a real growth engine, overcoming beliefs, and the frameworks she uses to stay creative without burning out. Plus, she's starting to build her first app, so we'll get into that process too. Alexa, welcome to Good Shift. I'm super excited to be recording in studio here with you.
Thank you so much for having me, Freya. I'm a big fan of your show already. I'm honored to be here.
Well, I've actually been a big fan of your work since I originally heard your podcast with our mutual friend Meredith. Shout out to Meredith.
She's the best.
And I've heard all the amazing things that you've done. So you've somewhat been on my wish list, and then I forgot about it, and then Meredith brought it back up again. And so it's a full circle moment to have you here today. Obviously, as everyone's heard, Alexa has made quite a few pivots, and congratulations on everything you've built.
Thank you so much.
A lot of our listeners here today are trying to make their first big shift. So can you think back to when you had less momentum through all of the shifts that you've made? And how did you think about some of those big pivots?
Yeah, I definitely think that pivots are often very challenging because they ask all of you, and sometimes you could be in a moment of struggle or strife when you are needing to pivot. So not only could you be being tested and challenged, but then you can often feel summoned to move in a different direction. So I think it requires a lot of courage and the desire to take risk. And that is something that I have grown very accustomed to as an entrepreneur. And it's actually something that I have fallen in love with. And I feel that it's also this muscle. As an entrepreneur, you get to flex this desire to pivot. And I feel that in my past, I've been tested again and again to pivot. And I know immediately that just this little voice inside starts speaking to me. I think often we are very much trained by the world around us to tell us who we are, what we need to be, what kind of job we need, the partner we need, all of these things. And that can often just cloud our judgment, I think, of where we truly need to go on the path. And so I turn to things like daily meditation, quiet times in nature, journaling, working with coaches like Meredith to get really clear and really connected to that inner voice, because it has often and always shown me where to go. Even if I'm afraid to do it, the pings still come through.
It's great to hear that you've had to take moments of stillness and reflection along the way. As I said in my introduction, looking at a resume like yours can make it seem like you've seamlessly jumped from place to place. Can you tell me a bit about the risks that have felt the scariest to take in your career and how you've moved through those anyway?
Yeah, absolutely. I think when I decided to leave Olipop back in 2022, that was by far the scariest because at that point I had established a career in social media. I had been known as someone who had helped to contribute and build this amazing company. And I felt that my ego is really connected to that. And I remember thinking, who am I if I'm not the Olipop girl anymore? And it really felt like I was hitting this edge at the company. And at that time, I'd been with them for about 5.5 years and feeling this itch to continue to grow and start my own business. And I had a great conversation with the founder, and it was this really open dialogue about my wants, my desires, where the company was at. And it felt like this sort of conscious uncoupling that had happened with them. And it was very difficult because it had been my heart and soul for 5.5 years. And so it really felt like a breakup. And I think oftentimes these work relationships can feel like a breakup and can stir up a lot of emotion, but that's super natural because we care about something. And one chapter closing and another one opening is something to not be afraid of. And it can bring so much freshness. But there was a while after that where I was quite scared of what I was going to become and how much I needed to reclaim in myself when I had taken that pivot.
Did you have your next step lined up when you left Olipop, or did you want to take the time afterwards to figure that out?
Yeah, it's a great question. I did have clients lined up for consulting, and it was so interesting because it was already naturally happening. I had people reaching out towards the end of that time to see if I was available for consulting. And I was like, this is interesting. It's all sort of happening. Why is this happening? Does this mean something? And so I decided to line up 2 consulting clients during that transitional time. And it actually felt really freeing because I had been working on this project of Olipop for over 5 years and was really craving some fresh energy. And it really just brought out a whole other side in me. So I did jump into that right after.
Everyone reaching out to you, is that something that inspired you to start your own business, or did that come naturally with you wanting a change?
Yeah, a lot of it often started to fall into place. I think that it was important to put some feelers out there, or when people were reaching out to say, hey, actually, I am going to be leaving. I can start working with you in a couple of months. But most of my business, most of my life, things have really fallen into place. There really wasn't this set plan, but really chasing and again, connecting to this feeling inside of what feels super aligned with who I am and where I'm at and what really lights me up, and really chasing that as my North Star. And so that kind of is what got me to make the jump.
Yeah, while we're here, if you could dive in a little bit to how things have sort of felt like they come together for you.
Yeah, for sure. Well, it sort of happened throughout my life, but I remember in my early days when I didn't know what I was going to do. I studied fine art photography in college. And I remember when I graduated, I just was so desperate for a job. I was going to literally do anything to work. And I remember taking lots of unique jobs, but I ended up assisting photographers and directors. And I remember thinking that I don't know where this is going to lead, but at least I'm on set. At least I'm behind the camera. This is still feeling aligned. But I remember just over time thinking like, if I really don't like something, like for instance, I was working on set of a McDonald's commercial, and I remember thinking, I don't really love McDonald's in terms of the quality of the product they're putting out there. And just something felt really icky inside. That's the only way I can describe it. And I remember I was doing a health coaching program on the side, and I was the girl showing.
I love that contrast.
It was crazy. I literally showed up on set with like a bag of like mini baby carrots and, and fresh fruit, and was handing it out to everyone on set. And I was like, something is contrasting too much here. Like, what does this mean? But I remember that led me to get my health coaching license. That didn't really work out well in terms of I was wanting clients, but nothing was manifesting. And then beyond that, I started getting out into the world of wellness, going to many events and networking in the wellness space. And then I ended up going to this beautiful event in LA called Mercado Sagrado. And it was filled with all these amazing makers and artisans who at that time were just so incredibly inspiring to me, from who they were as individuals to the products they were making. And so that's when I decided to start a blog called Superfood Super Life back in 2014 on Instagram. And I would go into the studios of these makers and businesses and do sort of an editorial photo shoot with them, an interview series, featured them on my blog and site. And then that was just this pure passion project. And from then, like, all these relationships started building in this network. And I decided to start advising some of these people on their photography for their businesses, their websites, how their unboxing should be for their products. And I just really had this entrepreneurial itch that I inherited from my family. And from there, I started my business. But it really was like following the breadcrumbs. And I think often a lot of people will mention following the breadcrumbs, but I think there's so much truth in that. But there was a time when I really didn't know where I was going, and I just showed up every day praying for some resolution.
Can you talk us through that a little bit more, when you didn't know where you were going and you were just saying that you showed up every day? Because I think so many of our listeners are in the position of not knowing what's next and they're feeling really stuck. So how did you show up every day and move through that period of uncertainty and maybe a bit of stuckness?
Yeah. Well, I can tell you, I was living at home after college for a few years because I wanted to save money and I wanted to figure out what I wanted to do. And because I did that, I felt like I had a little more flexibility to experiment. And so sometimes I think that could be good advice to, if you're in that position where you say, hey, if I can save money, but I can experiment more, I can network more, I can put myself in the right line of sight in a category I really feel passionate about. That really worked out for me because I was able to be all over the place during that time. I had so much flexibility to be out in the world and align myself and network and meet people that really helped to boost my career and make all these amazing contacts and introductions. So I felt that at that time, I remember asking the universe, I was like, I will do any job. I want to make money. I want to save money. I felt that I would stop at nothing to be happy and to find things that really lit me up. And as I started meeting these artisans, these makers, these unique businesses, something viscerally felt alive inside of me. And so I just thought to myself, there's something here. There's something to listen to. And I don't know what that is, but I can feel it in my body.
So it sounds like you've really always been chasing some sort of purpose in everything you do. And even when you don't know exactly what that might be, you're sort of listening to yourself, taking the time to give yourself space and put yourself out there. And do you think that's how you've managed to stay, from what I can see, relatively connected to a purpose or your core purpose throughout everything that you've done?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that in many ways, I think we all come here for a purpose. And I think sometimes our purpose can be expressed through work, but it also can be expressed through a hobby or a passion and something on the side. But I do believe that as humans and, something to enlighten and ignite our spirits, it's so good to have some purpose in life. And I remember, whether it was having this nonprofit experience when I was 16 years old, I had just come from Thailand and Burma and had changed a lot from witnessing what that world was like. And I wanted to kind of give back to that part of the world. And then it led me to start this nonprofit. It just ignited this sense of purpose, and it created a very energetic need to respond to that purpose. And so it started at that young age. And then when I was at Olipop, I was deeply inspired by the founders, Ben and David, because they brought so much conversation into the fold about our values and values as a team, values as founders. And they really lived it and walked that path so much that every day I was truly inspired, and I was affected by it. I was like, I want to be like them, and I want to figure out what values move me and what will align me every single day. And when you're around people who really live their values, especially in the world of today, it kind of takes your breath away. So I think we might not always know what it is, but when you're around it, I think it's hard to miss.
And I love what you said about whether that's in your work or your hobbies. And obviously it's very cool that you've taken what felt purposeful and ignited you in your hobbies and you've made that into your work, which is great to see with what you're doing now with Social Bloome.
Yeah.
While we're on the Olipop topic, I want to talk a little bit about when you left and you had those conversations about leaving. Because I imagine there was a bit of fear around that and you felt like you were really tossing something away. So how did that conversation go down when you had to tell your boss, and how did you move through those actual practical steps of transitioning yourself out of Olipop?
Yeah, I initially started communicating to leadership that I was feeling stuck at the company, felt important to be honest and transparent. And so a few months after that, we had set up time to talk. And I remember feeling that, I wanted certain things. I wanted to grow in certain ways. And with a company like Olipop, in the way that they had grown and in how many more people were on the team, what I wanted was a bit more suited to a smaller, more stealth team versus one with over 100 employees. So I think being honest and transparent, figuring out what would be the best next steps. And the company did so much to support me. And so I'm very grateful because they did provide this transitionary landing strip for me. So that was incredible and gave me some time to think. Part of that even included someone to do some business coaching for me, which I thought was a great tip for other business owners and founders, that when people transition out, that could be an interesting person to have on that individual's team. And so they provided that to me. And that really helped me figure out, what do I want to do next? And that's when Social Bloome came about. And so my tactile next steps were setting up clients so I could have funds coming in, working with this business coach to envision this future and the realities of what I wanted to offer in the business. And I also think just taking time to heal and process and reflect that amazing, hugely important chapter in my life. So those are the three things that stick with me from that time.
And are you saying that Olipop provided that business coach for you?
Yes.
That is so incredible.
Yeah, they do a lot of amazing things. They really do go above and beyond for their employees. And I think that is part of why it's such a successful company and the amazing culture that they've created, and honored to have been a part of those early days and that culture, because I've never seen anything like it. And I truly would wake up excited and jump out of bed every day to work for the company. And I think that can feel rare at times in the world of today.
Well, it's good for people to know that exists out there, because I feel like a lot of people sitting in their jobs, working for someone's trash, which is absolutely not the case. It's just about finding the right person.
Yeah, they're listening to your podcast at lunch is what they're doing.
Yeah, exactly. And I love that when you're making that transition, you could be open and honest with your team and the people that you're working for, because so many people, they might be setting up their business on the side, and then as soon as they're ready to go, they tell their boss, right, I'm out. And you don't sort of get that transition where, obviously, if you had just done that, you wouldn't have necessarily got that support that Olipop could offer you. And obviously most businesses don't offer that sort of thing, but typically your boss is going to have some great experience or words of wisdom or some connections that they can offer you.
Yeah.
And so that, having those relationships and leaving them in a good place is an awesome thing to hear.
Yeah, no, it was amazing. And I think they'll go down in history as one of the most conscious and elevating companies to have existed. So can't wait for their book to come out about that.
Oh, me too. So what beliefs did you have to let go of about yourself in order to make some of these big pivots that you've gone through?
Yeah, I would say, I think as a woman, there's so much pressure on us to look a certain way, to act a certain way. And I think for me, one of the biggest things I've worked through is my sense of self-worth and what I bring to the table. And so I knew I could always show up and do a great job, but having that trust built with them and then being able to deliver on that and see that show up in the success of a brand really just elevated my sense of self-worth. And so I feel like I had to let go of the idea that there's not a seat for me at the table, even though I was younger at the time, in my mid-20s, and also that I hadn't had the right experience to contribute. And so I actually didn't go to traditional business school for marketing. I was a fine art photographer. My parents were entrepreneurs, and I actually had my own version of the social media agency before Olipop. And it was that kind of thing where I just got on the horse. I started consulting, hired all my friends, and that was that experience. And then Olipop was one of my clients when I had that first iteration of the social agency. And it was with their first beverage venture. So I had known the guys for a long time. And I think I had to just let go of this thought, like, I'm not the one to do this. And I remember coming across a quote that always inspires me. And it's something along the lines of, if not you, then who? What if it is actually, you who is summoned to come to this table and to express and to show up, no matter what your age is. So just letting go of that belief really unlocked new levels of confidence for me as a woman and just as someone in business.
And how did you go about letting go of that belief? Because these things are always so much easier said than done. Did you have to put in quite a lot of work around that, or was it a more simple process of just being able to unlock that in your mind and move forward from there?
Yeah, I think it required me speaking up and using my voice, being my authentic self, giving real feedback when I didn't like something or I had other unique ways to contribute. And I would say I, would do my at-home work of, practicing affirmations in the mirror and talking to my friends and just practicing how will I address this with leadership, with people I'm intimidated by. And so just getting, getting pumped up, but then also just taking risks. And again, I think that's at the core of entrepreneurship and this thing that I sense in the relationship of growth of like, what's a risk I can take that is going to test my boundaries and relationship with myself to get me closer to what I envision. So I saw myself as someone who deserved a seat at the table, and a risk would include saying something that maybe I'm uncomfortable to say, but something truly valuable and real. And the moment I would say it, I just would feel like this weight lift off of my shoulders and feel like, no, like I do know what I'm saying. It comes from such a pure place, and to fully own that and know that is actually so freeing. And so I almost just kept, then starting to look for entry points in future conversations of ways I could like drop all of those nuggets of authenticity, I would say.
Yeah, I love that. You're wiring your brain to look for the opportunities and the pathways rather than the barriers. And it's so important that you say that. We continue to get told about whether it's affirmations in the mirror or pep talks on these certain things. And I feel like they start to become almost something that we hear a lot, but we don't process properly.
Yeah.
And they are so important. And everyone that I talk to, like on this podcast or other successful people, everyone has their own version of something that they're doing like that.
Yeah.
They're not necessarily born this way. Like everyone's putting in the work to do these things. And I think that's such an important lesson for everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, also working with a coach was tremendously helpful. I think if you can afford that or join a group, which is what I did as well, that was a major unlock in testing my beliefs, challenging them, setting up tactile next steps of how do I make that vision a reality. And the other thing I would say too is I realized that at Olipop, they kept reinforcing this idea of growth mindset. And I sort of knew what it was, but I didn't fully understand it. But it's this idea that you can never fail. You're either growing or learning. And that when there is a challenge or something doesn't go your way, that's that moment of learning. Whereas on the other side, you're succeeding. And I think in my younger days, I felt like I was really hard on myself. I think oftentimes we can be. And I would say, I failed at this, or I didn't do this right. And so just that mindset of switching to the growth mindset, it just opened up this whole world for me where it was just like, I'm never failing. I'm either growing or learning. And it was such an inspirational tone to set. So every day at work, I walked in with that. And it kind of just created this amazing breeding ground for creativity to thrive as well, because I wasn't afraid of failing anymore.
You talked about the coaching that you did.
Yeah.
Did you go out and seek that? Did someone give you that advice? And then what did you do going into that? And can you give us a little bit of an insight as to the things that you came out of those coaching experiences or those group experiences with?
Yeah, I've done a significant fair share of groups and coaching, both one-on-one and then in group settings. But at Olipop, they actually provided coaching for some individuals within leadership. So it started within the company. It happened when I transitioned, like I'd mentioned. And then once I left Olipop and I started Social Bloome, I remember feeling extremely overwhelmed. I was begging the universe for a sign and some help. And so I thought to myself, maybe I need a business coach or a financial coach just to help me, or even a life coach to help me navigate these difficult times. And I was at an event. I met a couple of unique people that night, and one of them knew Meredith, and she recommended that I explore coaching with her. And Meredith Baker is just such an incredible coach. And I remember our first call, I was in tears being like, I'm having a really hard time as an entrepreneur. And like, I really see this future, but I'm so overwhelmed. My whole life is just work and I can't keep living like this. But I feel that there's something right here. And I remember right away, it was do a meditation of what your life looks like in 6 months and what your dream life looks like. And I remember that like calmed down the tears, my breathing normally returned. And I was just like writing down, I'm like waking up at the beach and I'm meeting with my team nice. And I'm so great, and having this beautiful, like healthy lunch and then hopping on a plane to go meet with my other clients and, just whatever that was. But it really shifted me into what is the dream life? What is the dream setup? And then she says at the end of that, she says, okay, I want you to reverse that whole thing. What's the first baby step you take to getting there? That. So I think that also applies not only to personal coaching, but actually to a lot of clients. I bring that work or just that practice into sometimes the projects I'm working on. And sometimes the first conversation I have with the client now is, what is your end goal? What does success look like? What is the dream vision? And how do we reverse engineer it? And then what are the first few steps? And that can really help complement some of the business planning and strategy. And sometimes people don't spend enough time thinking of like, what do I really want? What's underneath it all? And so Meredith helped me a lot with that specific visioning exercise.
That's awesome. I love how you come through a period of such overwhelm, like starting your business and everything. And anyone who's recently started a business or is running a business now will definitely be able to relate to that. And I think it's really cool that you can lean on having a coach and different things like that. That's a common theme through the podcast. Like majority of people have leaned on a coach or an advisor, even if it's just about like their accounts or something, but just going out seeking help when you need to do that. And Meredith is getting some serious airtime on this podcast.
Totally.
Which is great. But I also have an episode with Meredith for anyone who wants to like dive deeper into knowing a few more things around what she does there, because as proven by Alexa, she's amazing with that sort of thing. So we were sort of just talking about a very big challenge for you, which was starting your own business and the sense of overwhelm there. Are there any other big challenges that you could speak to that you want to talk about how you moved through those along your career pivot journey?
Yeah, definitely. I would say in the early days of Social Bloome, I was consulting for a luxury basics clothing brand called Goldie Tees. And it was nice because she brought me in to advise on brand and had a bit of sort of runway and consistency. And I remember having a conversation with that founder saying, I also want to bring on other clients. Like I love this brand, but my bigger vision is also to bring in more people into the fold and really build out my agency. So I think a challenge was being honest in that moment, because sometimes it's hard to tell a client about, maybe you are going to make space for others and that you still value them, but you want something else, and just owning your truth in that and being able to be very direct and communicate clearly. That was a very important and challenging moment. I would say setting up the financial piece, because it's still a business at the end of the day. So figuring out what money is coming in, what money is flowing out, and am I appropriately budgeting all my proposals, all of my contractors, my employees. And I would say I'm definitely a creative girly that has now become a numbers girly because I've been forced to through the nature of this career. But there were times where I felt like my, financials were all over the place, and, I was calculating personal budgets with work budgets. And so I really had to learn the mathematics of business, and I still am to this day. I think it'll be a forever journey, but that's been immensely challenging. And for me to confront this false belief as well of like, I may have come from a creative background, but also I can apply that open thinking to being a numbers girl. And I'm always hungry to learn. And I am just so open to being a sponge. And so I've leaned really hard into finance and see such a benefit in being able to toggle those two sides of my brain now. And so that was a significant challenge of figuring out the financial piece. And lastly, I would say, at the end of the day, we're all humans, we're not robots. Sometimes there are things that are said that are challenging from an employee, from a client, in a meeting. Nothing is ever perfect. And I think just giving myself and all of those people grace, because you never really know what someone is going through, and we're all on our own journeys and paths, and just having the respect for yourself and for them to, you might have some really intense emotions, but just being able to always have kindness towards yourself and other people too, because we're all just doing our best. And sometimes we get tested in the business world. And so figuring out, how to not emotionally dump on people and how to sit back, do your own work. And then if there's something meaningful to say, to show up to the relationship with that thoughtfulness. And so that was challenging to have sort of, moments of being tested, but be like, I want to show up with a lot of grace in this moment. I want to step away from a heated conversation and decompress and then return again. And so just knowing we're always behind the wheel. We're the ones in control, and we can slow things down in order to live and operate the way that we want to has been very helpful in overcoming those challenges.
That is such powerful advice. Thank you for sharing all of those tidbits. So when you get to a point where you're really stuck with the financial things or whatever that may be, how do you go about learning those things? Or if you're coming across something new that you haven't dealt with before, what are your mechanisms for upskilling?
Yeah. I think that's where the power of a network comes in, and starting to tap into friends, colleagues, family who might be in that space and just saying, would love to pick your brain about business, about finance. I also love to read. I love podcasts. I think we can pick up so much information through those mediums, but I also think that it's really helpful to be vulnerable and brave and get on the phone with someone in that space and asking those questions and not being afraid to be a beginner or a novice, which I've definitely felt, and asking all the dumb questions, because that is really just a sign of your hunger to learn and to not be afraid of the judgment. And hopefully the person you're speaking to sees that and admires that bravery and is willing to give really solid advice. And so I would say, through all of those avenues, that's how I tend to lean into something new like business and finance. And it's been really exciting to feel like, oh, I'm learning the jargon now, or I'm figuring out how to do all of this. And just by asking around, even posting on social media too. I remember the way I found my CPA and bookkeeper was I posted that I was looking for someone new and great. And a family friend sent this amazing recommendation through. And now all of my books and back-end documents are crystal clear. So just amazing that even doing a post on social media for your ask in your community could be so helpful.
Yeah, and I like how you talk about asking those dumb questions, because it's really good for us to remember that the people who you're asking, they had their dumb questions at some point too. And if they're the right person, and hopefully most people are like this, they'll be so happy to answer those. So it's getting over that fear of not knowing things and over the imposter syndrome for even feeling like you can call someone up and talk to them about this area that you may not be 100% confident in. That's really helpful advice.
Yeah, I think even with those individuals, going back and saying, thank you so much for your time. This conversation led me to this, led me down the road to something amazing. Thanks to you. I think, you can never go back enough, and, just express gratitude if people are really going out of their way for you. And I think it really kind of inspires that mentor to keep on sharing and giving. So that's been a very helpful part in the journey of reflecting back and remembering just to stay in touch with people and thank them for the things that they did for you along the way.
Yeah, it's such an important thing to remember, circling back, because I feel like they give this advice and then they really want to know what happened as well. They're invested in it at this point. So it's nice to go back and close the loop as well as give gratitude for that.
Yeah, that's definitely been coming up a lot with the app, because I'm now moving into this new space in the tech category, and I really don't know too much about it. So I'm definitely in that phase right now in business.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about the app. So you said that you're starting a new app, and I think this is also such an interesting moment for yourself because you've obviously become very proficient in what you're doing at Social Bloome, and now you're going back to being a bit of a beginner. So can you talk us through what you're doing there and how you're moving through that process with the app of being a beginner again?
Yeah, it's very exciting. I knew that I wanted to do something new and fresh. I felt that with the agency and running it for the last 3 years, we've been able to get our rhythm and systems down and get really clear on what we do well. And the little voice inside of me started speaking again and saying, I'm ready for something else. And I think my mind works in this way where I love to identify white spaces in categories, whether it's something I'm working on or not. But I love looking for what is missing, what could be optimized, and what could be invented. And so as I was putting together client proposals, as well as these custom decks for clients, I realized that there was this space and need to create an app that would ultimately be this kind of dream technology that hasn't existed before in the marketplace to help support people organizing and planning their social and digital marketing needs. And so broadly, it will be a tool that I've always wanted to create. And right now I'm building custom versions of that for all of these clients. But by using both AI and human managers, I think it's going to be a really revolutionary tool to help support all different businesses to be much more organized and efficient as we move even deeper into this social space online.
I like the sound of that.
Yes, we all need it.
Helps
Just
us be more organized.
Make it easier. Let's go.
That's super exciting. And in terms of knowing that this was the right time, you obviously said you had that inkling that you were ready to move into another space. But how do you know that it's time to invest your energy in something else when you're obviously investing a lot of your energy into Social Bloome as well?
Yeah. Well, I set myself up to put aside a specific amount of money in the bank. So I knew that I always have, this nest egg if I need to fall back or if I need to lower the amount of clients I was servicing. And I also knew that there's a big white space in the market, and I really would love to be the first to create something like this in its category. And I also, within the business, I could basically structure it so that I could take on a few higher paying clients to keep the business in a healthy space, and also put a team together to help me delegate and outsource so that I don't need to be all the time in the weeds, but it's still operating and performing well. And so because I had the money set aside, because I had the organization of the agency put together, I now had this space for myself to start envisioning and drafting up what this app could be. So I felt that I had a bit of support and, sort of like an emergency fund if something were to happen or things would happen with a client to really take off and run with the idea. And also to the fact that I didn't see anything like this in the market before. And I just thought to myself, how cool would it be if I came up with a technology that would do the thing that I've been wanting and that I also was hearing across industries? I wish something like this could exist. And so that thought came again, like, if not you, then who? Something to that effect. And I was like, maybe I am the one to do it. So just kind of diving in, and it's been amazing of just leaning into that question, putting myself out there and starting to have conversations of like all these amazing people that are now coming to the table to help me build and support this vision.
And for someone who's thinking about starting something, they're looking at validating an idea, what's some advice you would give there? Because obviously you're not diving into starting this app blind. You've put a lot of thought into this, and you've said that you've seen a great white space that you want to jump into. So do you have any advice there for people starting something?
Yeah, this is something I heard from many professionals that were advising me at first, which is start talking to people who could be potential customers, understand their pain points, understand the current things and tools that they're using. And if your app were to deliver, just one tool, one main tool, would that be enough to get them to pay for that service? And so I started surveying a wide variety of potential consumers and getting a ton of feedback as to the answers to those questions. And so as I've been researching and surveying, not only has it already started to build a funnel for potential customers, but it's helped me get more clear on where is everyone stuck and frustrated, and how could a technology help alleviate those frustrations.
And how much time have you given yourself to do all of this before committing yourself to building the app?
Well, I would say I've been working on it for nearly a year now, from just concept to putting all the ideas into a deck, getting on the calls with people who have developed apps before, and then starting to survey people. And I actually have gone through the phase of working with a UI UX team and doing some information architecture when we are mapping out some of the flows of the design and the functionality of the app, trying to identify the MVP of the app. And that's also helped me in working with people in tech and in design. It's helped me to up-level my understanding of what are the pieces that go into it. And I've also brought in a fractional CFO to advise me on, and someone who's built apps before and has managed money in this space to advise me on how much is this going to take to build the app, to run it in its first year. Who else do you want to have on your team? And so I'm essentially just putting all these pieces together and thankfully getting to do it with fractional contractors. So I'm really grateful that we live in a world where we can do that because I'm able to do that with the budget I've set aside to invest my own money into it. And then top of next year, I'll be leading a fundraising round to take it off the ground.
Oh, that's so exciting.
Yeah.
Really excited to see where that goes.
Thank you.
And I also love that you're talking about doing something like building the app that you don't necessarily have all the skills for. A lot of people, I feel, have an idea, but they're like, oh, I can't do this aspect, I can't do this aspect. And you're really pulling on people around you and resources to make sure that you can close those gaps, which is awesome to hear.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I'm not a CTO or a UI UX designer, but not yet. Exactly. I can't wait to master all those categories. But I love learning, and I love learning about new categories and new systems. I love technology. And I think that no matter what happens with the app, while I'm really excited to see what's there, I love that I've just now brought in an influx of all these new individuals and new skill sets that I've never had before. And that's sort of feeding this desire to grow as well.
And that's cool too. I can see that this is still connected with your passions.
Yeah.
So you're talking about loving technology, and with an app, obviously technology makes sense. So you're still pulling on the things that you're inherently good at or passionate about to move into what you want to do next, which I think is another important reminder for everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. And I definitely am a believer that I think technology is a neutral tool, and I believe that we can either use it, for good or not for good. And so I feel that there is such a wide space in tech to bring in a lot of positivity and consciousness and support for people. And really, even as we excel into this age of AI and technology, thinking about how can the tech serve the people instead of the other way around. And so that's part of my ethos in going into it, to test that thesis. Is that possible? Is it possible to run a thoughtful, conscious tech company that does good for the world? And even I've been looking at, AI data centers that are using renewable energy, and thinking about like that entire system of like, if I were to build it as my dream version of it, is that possible? And so that's been a unique exercise to explore as well.
And there's the purpose piece. I love that. And I want to talk about balance and how you fit everything in, and doing whatever you like to do in your personal life as well.
Perfect. Well, something that I did that was also unique this year, was feeling burnt out with work, and I started having some dreams about whales, which sounds very crazy, but I was having dreams about whales. It just suddenly started happening, and I was like, this is interesting. Why am I dreaming about whales?
There's a lot worse things to dream about.
Absolutely. I was like, let's keep the whales coming. And the whales were speaking, and I was like, I was getting all these hits and downloads, and the whales were speaking to me, and they said, you're an earth steward. You're here to help people remember the ocean and to fall in love with the ocean and to be a voice for the voiceless. And so I was like, oh, I wonder what that means. I started following these ocean photographers around the world, came across one individual named Rachel Moore who lives in French Polynesia, swims with the whales, and had an image of a whale's eye that went viral around the globe and continues to go viral. And so I reached out to her, started following her. She posted this trip to Tahiti and to swim with the humpback whales, and I decided to apply for it. And I got in, and I also decided to get my scuba license right before that trip. And right when I started the scuba, which also included free diving on the side, it really just became this amazing antidote to all of the tech and computer time, because I'm sure all of us feel like we are one with our phones and one with our computers, and it takes so much to rip us away. But there's such a beautiful world out there and such a beautiful planet to steward and connect with. And I felt that this was this pull for me to get out of Los Angeles and go do something somewhat crazy, and to get into the ocean and go swim with the humpback whales, with the moms and the babies. And it was one of the most adventurous and exhilarating experiences of my life. We also swam with sharks, some spicy sharks as well, oceanic white tips. And I remember thinking to myself, if I can swim with sharks, I can build an app. Like, I can do that. And so it really,
I love that comparison.
It really pushed me to just, again, like I was in a really new situation. I had always loved the ocean, but I wasn't going on these expeditions. And then on that trip, it was an all-female trip. And I was really inspired by all these other women who loved expeditions, or they were jumping out of airplanes, or they just were really alive and unique individuals. So it just brought the life and spirit back into my body. And when I returned and have now started to get back into my work and be in this tech space, I realized that the ocean and being in that place is really is how I find that balance. And so I'm excited to bring more of that into my life. But that was an incredible journey. And I just came off that trip a couple weeks ago. So I'm still feeling very fresh.
Oh, that sounds great. I'll have to dive into your Instagram. I'm sure you've got some pictures up there, but that sounds absolutely amazing. And Rachel Moore was
Rachel Moore is the photographer, and this whale eye is truly magnificent. Everyone thinks it's an AI rendition of a whale's eye, but you look at it and it just is like the most magical, illuminated, primal image of this blue halo eye. And she has such an incredible relationship with the ocean, and she's gone on to go to the United Nations Ocean Conference to speak on behalf of the whales. She's working with the Tahitian government to slow down the ferries so that there's less impact with those whales, and less strikes, I should say, because with that whale, the name of the whale was Sweet Girl, and she developed this beautiful relationship with the whale. And several weeks later, after this amazing encounter, it had been struck and died from a ferry crossing. And so her story impacted the globe, went viral, and she's just been a really inspiring person to be around, to see like, how does someone dedicate their whole life to the ocean and to nature? And I didn't realize this, but I guess whales are incredibly important for our ecosystem. And essentially, the whale poop feeds the plankton, which creates over 40% of Earth's oxygen. And because I feel very inclined to move into the sustainable ocean space, it was just amazing that, this amazing giant animal that's been evolving for over 50 million years is totally this linchpin in like how this beautiful ecosystem works. And so my goal is to try to balance like this world of tech and connectivity and business with this beautiful outward world of whether it be the ocean or the planet at large, and think, how can my successes help to support and protect the environment, and starting maybe with some ocean work. So just some fun facts to learn. But I think that, we sometimes forget that the world is so magical, and just to get off our screens and go experience that too is how I found balance. Long story short.
It sounds like you have another few career pivots ahead of you. Scuba diving with the whales,
yes,
and whale conservation. I see it in your future.
Yes, I want to turn her life into a film, or maybe do a Netflix series on other Earth stewards too, because I think that there's a lot of stories to tell in that space.
This conversation is really cool because we can sort of see how you follow the threads of the things that you're passionate about and things that feel purposeful to you.
Yeah.
And so it'll be very interesting to watch your journey and see what comes from this time spent with the whales in your future.
Yeah, I'm hoping to have all my offsites in the water with the whales. So come join the company. That's probably what we'll be doing.
Yeah, are you hiring?
Definitely.
Okay, so I want to go back, not quite as exciting or beautiful as the whales, but still very cool, into when you joined Olipop as a startup. A lot of people, I think, out there are wondering whether joining a startup is the right move for them. And obviously, Olipop turned out to be a rocket ship of a startup and an awesome place to be. But what advice would you have for people considering joining a startup, and is there anything they should really know?
Yeah. Well, I would say so important to look at the leadership and how they treat their people. I think oftentimes we can see a successful startup who has just raised a ton of capital. They're in all of the business headlines, and we think to ourselves, oh, it would be so great to go work with that company. But sometimes you'll get there and the culture isn't that great, or the leadership isn't even that present, and the job really isn't what you want. And so in those early days of Olipop, we really did start from zero and from nothing. And so I've immediately felt a connection with Ben and David after working with them on their previous venture, just because of how unique they were as leaders and how much respect they had for me and how much I grew under their wing. And so I just felt like they were bringing out the best in me. I think that's a great signal of like, is this team, is this leadership bringing out the best in others? And are they bringing out the best in me? And I also think, a startup is not for everyone. A startup challenges you. You have to be so out of the box. I think you have to love dynamic thinking and problem solving and not walking this straight linear path, but being able to weave unique connections and correlate things in ways that have never been done before. And so I think not every mind or individual wants that, which is totally fine. But my parents were both entrepreneurs. So as a child, I grew up like seeing that, working for them, and really just loving that out of the box thinking and being able to pull and piece different things together in ways that like weren't linear, but that I could create a through line with. And I think that being at a startup, it can demand a lot of you to really see that grand vision at the end and think, how am I going to create that when we're in no stores yet? And so I think you have to have, for me, like I had like a lot of vision and a lot of passion and energy to articulate the story of what are we building. And I think that being a really strong storyteller can really help you in those days too, because that's how you start to bring people on for the ride. You start to build trust. But I would say in a startup environment, sometimes, financially, a startup might not be able to pay you what maybe a more corporate company would be able to pay you. So just assessing, where am I at right now in my own financial journey? Am I willing to take that risk? And, can I also set up a contract where if I'm not happy, I can easily get out? I think contracts can be incredibly helpful for people so that both parties feel that they have autonomy to let go if they need to. So that would be my other piece of advice. But you never really know what it's like until you're there. And sometimes with a startup, you can also get out what you put in. And I highly recommend this amazing book. It's called Impact Players. I forgot the author's name, but it was from a senior in leadership from Oracle. And it was one of the most incredible books I've ever read. And it was really about working on dynamic teams. And it really shaped the way I sort of looked at the startup environment and how I contributed. And so I would say that might be a helpful read for some people to say, oh, does this like relate? And does this inspire me to kind of show up and bring like all parts of myself into this space? And so I think you kind of figure out right away if it works for you or not. It can kind of chew you and spit you out if it's not. But, sometimes that can also be a good thing. And I think just embracing what it is that brings out the best in you and coming back to that. I think, whether it's, this is a challenging environment and that's actually what's best for me, or this is a toxic environment and I want to be in a healthier atmosphere. So just, I think meditating on those questions could be helpful.
Yeah, that's really helpful to hear. And I imagine that working in a startup from a very early stage startup like you did really set you up for starting Social Bloome as well. Obviously, you'd run some businesses and different things prior, but all of the business acumen that you would have got from being there and having to do everything, like in a startup where you don't just have one particular role. So do you feel like that set up a good foundation for you?
Yes, I think that the hard thing is, in those earlier days, most people will wear like 10 hats, right?
Yeah.
And in some ways it really pushes you to learn about all the different roles at the company. And then as the company grows, you start to niche and they bring in experts in all of those said categories. And so I would say there is something beneficial in maturing and not having to wear all the hats. And I think that in the beginning days, it's really fun. And I was such a yes person. I remember in my first iteration of my social agency, I was helping clients ship boxes. I was photographing events. I was, producing shoots. I was writing copy for newsletters, and I was just doing. And I wanted to learn about all of that. But, there was a time when it just felt right to get support or bring in someone else who was even more skilled. And for me to realize, actually, I want to delegate. I want to zoom back, and I want to oversee things from that, strategic perspective and not be so deep in the weeds. Mm-hmm. And so that's been a really beautiful thing in the maturing process and the journey for me of being like, no, it feels good to delegate and let go and mentor.
Yeah, well, that's earning the right, isn't it? Once you've been able to do all the things yourself,
then
it's easy to be able to guide other people to do them because you know already.
Yeah, you're the talent, you're the video editor, you're doing it all. And I think it's helpful because at least you can know when someone comes in, do they know what they're doing? Are they right for the job? And you're like, oh, actually, I did work on, I did press for the company, and I'm, talking to this PR team, and it doesn't really feel aligned. So it was nice to have general awareness of all of it. Mm-hmm. But in the end, I think it's nice to figure out, what's really your calling and how can you just do more of that. And
if you could only give one piece of advice to someone who is starting up their own business, what do you think you would distill that down to?
That's such a great question. Can you handle the challenging days? And can you still connect to the vision through those challenging days of what really it feels right and aligned with your purpose, like within it all? So I guess saying, is the purpose of the business, does that ignite you enough to go all the way? Because we know that there's going to be challenges, there's going to be setbacks, whether it's with your people, with the finances, with the market and the world at large. And you have to be so connected to your vision to be able to really see it through. And I think that it definitely calls all of you forward. But I would say, I love the idea of trying to meld something you're good at with something that brings value and purpose to the world, and something that, you see yourself growing into for a period of life. The world is moving so fast. I think one of the, I would say, secret sauces of probably my success in my life is that I actually love to commit long-term to things, and I don't give up when it's hard. And so my advice would be to, find that within yourself of actually when it's hard, maybe to lean in more and to challenge yourself to, to see is there something within you that can actually rise to the occasion. And that, I think, will allow you to enjoy the business waves and ebbs and flows in it, and to hopefully find more of yourself on the other side. It's so hard to pick just one, but I guess I hope that makes sense in what I'm trying to say. But to seek that purpose and know that there can be purpose in business as well.
Well, that's exactly what this podcast is about, is going after your purpose. And you wrapped that up really nicely, a few core themes. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
Quickly want to dive into community and how you see that as a growth engine. This is your specialty, and it's largely what you've created your company around and what you built at Olipop and different things like that. So we'd love to hear that from you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, as someone who's naturally social and loves to be around people, I sort of felt myself naturally drifting into social media for that reason. And I remember in the early days of Instagram, just starting to meet friends online and then meet them in person. And because I just loved meeting new friends and building community naturally, that led me to create like this really beautiful network of folks in the wellness industry. And that sort of became my niche. But I truly had the passion for it. We had those shared values, and I really nurtured those relationships. And so I think something that's unique about me is I do love to take time out of my day, and probably did this a little bit more in the earlier days, but I would take time out of my day to go and meet up with creators and influencers and get to know who they were as people and know their story and get to know them as friends. And I would do my absolute best to stay in touch with them throughout the years of Olipop. And I actually still am friends with many of those people, even now that I'm not at Olipop any longer. And so for me, I felt that there was this beautiful reciprocity in, as I was building community within Olipop, and now with some of the other current clients we service, that they would support what we're doing, and then that the brands actually show support for those individuals. And so I used Olipop as this way to uplift the community, whether it was, bringing in a yoga instructor to lead programming for an amazing event, or a chef, or an herbalist. And so I think for me, I love bringing people together in real life, and also realized even through the pandemic, I had to get really skilled at how do I create community online and put together programming on Zoom. And so it really tested me to create something meaningful where we were really using Olipop as a stage to give back to our community and set that tone. And I think people have really positive memories of it because Olipop, I think, went above and beyond to really show value for their customers and make them feel a part of the larger culture of the company. And I think, those words can be thrown around a lot, but there truly was just so much love and effort. And I know still continues to that day. And I think those are the things that just don't go unnoticed. And so while it does support the company, the people are the lifeblood of the brand. Community is everything. We know that even moments of challenge, it's our innate and immediate community that is showing up to help us through. And so just always remembering to invest in that first and foremost, because those are the people that are going to speak highly of you and refer you out to friends or tell people about your brand. And I think that in the world of paid media and everything as well, just building trust with people and still not forgetting the beauty of organic relationship building is still really valuable, and maybe if not more valuable nowadays too. And I would just say, community is the lifeblood, and it's so important just to invest in people first and foremost.
Yeah, and I feel like a lot of people can overlook community, especially in the early days of building something, because it's more qualitative, right? You can't get, okay, we got X return on investment from doing this, but it is, as you say, it's the lifeblood of things. And I think it also really helps you connect to a purpose when you can see people coming in around you and benefiting or being excited about what you're doing.
Yeah. And I think it's nice to even think of it like could we execute our marketing where we are saving and allocating some funds to, investing in organic, real sort of, deeper relationships? And then can we also invest in paid, and could those work in tandem with each other? I don't think it has to be one or the other. So that's been an interesting journey as well, to learn about where a brand is at what stage, and what is appropriate in terms of how much or how little we need to pull on those levers in those different categories.
And if you're thinking about community, let's say you were advising someone who's just getting started on how they should start with a community, what's a key piece of advice that you would give to them, or a key ingredient that a lot of people miss?
I would say just start. Don't wait to have a budget or to have someone to tell you what to do. I think, I have a lot of friends that are great at this, and it's something I like to cultivate as well. But, it's so easy to bring people together, and we're in this age where everyone is dying to be together again. So I think creating an experience for people, thinking about how can I leave someone in better condition after they come to my event or my gathering or pop-up, and just sort of imagining what would my dream pop-up be? And then how could I create that? Even just starting with the funds and the tools that I have in my toolbox right now, and not waiting, because like one thing I started this year, which, sort of came out of nowhere, and not really out of nowhere, but after the fires in LA, I really wanted to do something to give back to the community. So I started a whole wellness series called Sanctuary LA. And I started that with my partner, Delete Spector. And we would do these wellness pop-ups. And we partnered with a beautiful flower studio, and we did yoga and flower arranging. And it was just this amazing thing. And it was completely outside of work, but I felt this calling. And then I just thought to myself, like, what are the threads I can do to make that happen? And of course, like everything I do, like lives in a deck. So I built a deck for my vision of the sanctuary. And then Delete was actually a client of mine, who's this amazing yoga teacher. And she also is a super talented interior designer. And we just jived so hard. And we were like, let's do this together. And she, we had never done anything like that, but together with our skill sets, it was so successful. So maybe bringing on a partner would also be great advice. Bring on that partner to really help you, execute, craft your vision. And we just made it happen. And, there were things we learned along the way, but it has been so exhilarating to, again, just like be a beginner, say yes, and go for it. But having a partner definitely helps, I will say.
And if you're going to put on an event or create some sort of community moment, what would you say to people who are worried that no one will show up or it will just be a flop? I think that's a really common fear.
Yeah, absolutely. I think just, don't be afraid for it to start small. I mean, there's power in it, even starting with, maybe the goal is, what if 6 guests is like the first thing, and it's more of like a curated dinner, and, there's, you could, have this curated dinner. It's like you and 6 guests, like just starting from that, because, and if it's a flop, maybe it's the way that you're crafting the event, or you're articulating the description of it, or maybe there is something that people really need. Like, say everyone is really wanting to do, like ceramics right now. Could you team up with a ceramic studio and host something? Like, what is it that you sense that the community needs that would really excite them to show up? And then how could you put yourself in that position to be the co-host or to lead something there? So I think figuring out what that programming is that excites people, and then let it be small. I think that, just because it's small doesn't mean it isn't successful. I think that's a great phrase to live by as well, because even as entrepreneurs, like we all start from zero and our paths are not linear, but the fact that we're doing it and we're in the arena, we're going to learn and grow. And that's how we have the chance of actually, growing to, the dream of having a huge, widely successful event. You have to start from, the group of 6 people first.
I'm taking mental notes here. Okay, and it's what we said about if you go out and it does flop or whatever, then that's just a learning, right? Reframing that to be a learning. What went wrong? How could we fix that for next time?
Yeah, absolutely. For sure.
Okay. So how do you define success and fulfillment today? And has that changed for you over time?
Yeah, I think that success for me is knowing that I could be gone tomorrow and feel like I really did what I needed to do while I was alive. And while that's a really, sort of intense thing to say, I lost my mom back in 2019, and she was my closest friend and confidant. And so that really changed me as a human, and it showed me the impermanence of time and our existence here. And when she passed, I stopped holding myself back and staying small in many ways. And it sort of lifted this weight that had been, I think, maybe keeping me small in certain ways. And so success to me is living my most authentic self, no matter if it's well received or not. I think that I've become much more confident and excited to share my full self with the world, but it wasn't always that way. And so if I can feel that I am living as the most brave, true, authentic version of me, I feel like I'll look back and be very proud. And I think that you learn and I've learned just like as I've made more money and as I've had more wins and successes, like it really isn't about the money, and that the money is, it's meant to go to beautiful things and expand your life, but without purpose and without meaningful connections, I think that's the other end of success is like, do I have meaningful connections, and did I leave the world and those people in better condition than when I found them? That's really my definition of success. And I try to remember that when I'm having to crunch the numbers,
Yeah, or having a tough day. And thank you for sharing that all with us. That is really powerful and beautiful. And I think a really great reminder for everyone, especially people who are going out and feeling, as you say, in the crunch the numbers phase or chasing something, to come back what success at the end of the day is going to look like for them.
Yeah, totally. There's definitely these rhythms of life, that my mom passed really at this, influx moment when I was working at Olipop. And I remember feeling like I couldn't stop working. And I remember them saying, like, you need to take some time, you need to just reset. And, and it was really hard. It was hard to go through those waves of grief while I had to still work eventually and perform. But it really shaped my reality and just allowed me to be so grateful for like every single moment, and to feel, to really see life in a way that maybe not everyone sees it at like this younger age of losing a parent. And so, it was very challenging, but in some ways it like really set me free to be like much more fearless in my life. So I'm grateful for that.
Oh, that's a beautiful way to honor your mom as well. Like, I'm sure that that's exactly what she would want, to be able to be in a position where you feel like you're able to be your true, authentic self and be set free to do all the amazing things that you've built.
Yeah, she was total dynamite. She was the original boss babe for me. So
well, I can see where it comes from.
She lives on. She lives on.
Okay, we'll wrap up with some quick fire questions.
Yeah.
There's a ton of other things I could ask you, but we'll have to save that for another day. So, top resource that you'd recommend for people wanting to make a career shift or start their own company?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Masterclass. I feel like there are so many inspiring videos on that platform, fairly, easy to join, and just starting to watch, experience, and drift into some of those videos and say, oh, maybe, this thing interests me or that interests me. And then you kind of get this, unique, and kind of quick deep dive on a certain category or person. So I love Masterclass as a resource.
I've actually been getting served their ads on Instagram. So now I have the incentive to dive in now that I've had the recommendation.
Perfect.
What's a daily habit that you have that has helped you move through stuckness?
I love to exercise. I feel like exercise saves my life every day, and moving my body. I'm a big fan of swimming, of hiking. And I also love this modality called the class, where you're shaking, you're screaming, you're moving, and you get to be primal. And I think that in the world of today, you're not always seeing people on the street just doing that. And so to have a safe container and a healthy space to release your anger and release your sadness, it's a space where you can cry and yell and do whatever you want. And so that's been so helpful for me. And they do streaming online as well. So highly recommend checking out the class for anyone out there. It's a very helpful tool.
I really like the sound of that.
Yeah.
Where can people find more about you and learn more about Social Bloome and what you offer there?
Yeah, you can follow me on Instagram at Alexa Gray & Co. You can follow Social Bloome at Social Bloome, and it's Bloom with an E at the end. And same for our website at socialbloom.com.
And I just want, I know that we're running short on time, but I would just love if you could give us a really quick overview of what exactly you guys do at Social Bloome, because I know that you've helped so many people take their marketing and their community and social to the next level. So just want to hear a little bit about that from you.
Yeah. It depends on the client, but I would say, people look at us as their right-hand arm and team to execute all of their social and digital needs. And so I also bring the skill set of like brand and creative direction. And so a brand will come in, we'll audit where they are, and then I'll build the essential team to help them create the brand of where they need to go. So whether that's working with photographers, graphic designers, whether it's bringing on a performance team, organizing their newsletters. And then from a social perspective, thinking about what's the community we're going to build, how are we going to engage with them, the social content, posting, the engagement and community management, the gifting, collaborations with other brands. And so I sort of come in to oversee and audit and execute on social and some of the other digital marketing channels. But depending on which client it is, kind of ebbs and flows from there.
Great. Thank you for providing that insight.
Yeah.
If you could leave people with one piece of advice, it can be something you've already talked to or something new that's come to mind, what would it be?
My advice would be to never forget that you're here for a reason and the world needs you, and to never stay quiet and to allow yourself to be free in the world, because you deserve that.
That is beautiful. I feel like that's a mic drop moment and we should just end things right here.
Perfect.
But thank you so much for your time today. I'm honored to have you on the podcast, and thank you for sharing all of your wisdom and insights across both business and brand building, but also your personal insights that have really helped you move forward through change and stuckness and all the things that have got you on this amazing path.
Thank you so much, Freya. This was an amazing conversation. I'm such a big fan of you, and I know you're going to go so far too with this amazing show you've created. So thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you. And that is a wrap.
That's a wrap.